Okay, welcome back. Erev Tov. Today we continue Maimonides' introduction to Perek Helek, where he starts off with discussing um, the different opinions regarding our reward and the punishment, and discussing the concept of Olam Haba. And now we are going through the last part. This is the last class on this topic. The 13 fundamental principles, which we have already covered in the previous two classes, the first 9. And so now we're going to do 10, 11, 12, and 13. And you, at the end of this class, will have all 13 fundamental principles of our faith as formulated by Maimonides and generally accepted as the 13 principles of Jewish faith. It's pretty much accepted by everybody as the 13 principles of faith. Okay, so we started off the first tier, the first category of these principles was basically the basic principles of monotheism, right? The first ones was the existence of God, and that God is one, and that God has no physical form. And we went into that. What exactly does that all mean? The second tier had to do with more specifically God's relation to humanity, right? We spoke about prophecy, the prophecy of Moshe, right? And those are fundamental pillars, because without that, without divine revelation, and without the prophecy of Moshe and the eternity of the Torah, right? These are the fundamental principles that base the eternity of the Torah. And that's why it's so fundamental to Judaism. Now, we go into the 10th principle, Hayesod Ha'asiri, כי הוא יתעלה יודע מעשיהם של בני אדם. This 10th principle, fundamental principle of faith, is that God knows man's actions. ואינו מעלים אינו מהם, and he doesn't ignore man. לא כדעת מי שאמר עזב אדוני את הארץ. Not like those that the prophet Yehezkel brings, those people who say, Azav Adonai Ta'aretz, God forsake the world. He has no connection to the world. Ela kemo shene'emar. However, it's as the statement of Yirmiyahu, Gedol ha'isa verav ha'aniliyah, right? He is great in his wisdom. Basically, one of the earlier principles that we spoke about was the infinite nature of God. He's not bound by physicality, and therefore he's not bound by time. And also his knowledge and his knowledge and understanding is infinite. So it says, Gedol ha'isa verav ha'aniliyah, right? That he knows everything. Everything is revealed to him. Asher einecha pekuchot al kol darchei bnei adam. Says that your eyes are observing all the actions of man. So Azav Adonai Ha'aretz, right? That God forsake the world. That fits maybe the more classical / philosophical model of creation, whereby God created the world once upon a time, right? And like a carpenter that builds a table, once upon a time, he built a table, he sold the table, there is zero relationship between him and the table. And we said, our model, our concept of creation is different. We don't believe that God created the world once upon a time. We say, המחדש בטובו בכל יום תמיד מעשה בראשית, right? That God renews his creation every single day. And we resembled it, if you remember, we said, what does that mean that he is first? He says, not that he was first in time, but he's the primary cause. He is what holds everything in existence, which by definition necessitates that God is always aware of our existence and our actions. It's all within his knowledge. If it weren't within his knowledge, it wouldn't be, it wouldn't exist. And we compare this to a person that is imagining something in his mind. So long as he's holding that image in his mind, it exists. However, if he were to stop thinking of it for even a moment, it would cease to exist. It would not exist anymore. So, some atheists like to say, "Well, God, this universe is so great. It's so huge. Why would God bother himself with the actions of man?" Right? When there are all these stars and maybe countless other solar systems that have a habitable zone in them, that may have a life-sustaining planet like Earth, with who knows how many species of living creatures there may be throughout the entire universe. Why would God care what we do? And I think that's a very it's a very limited way of thinking. Well, because you're thinking of God in the same way that you think of man, right? A person has a child, he loves this child, right? It's his only child. He has a second child, he loves a second child too. Maybe man has capacity to love 10 children, maybe 15 children. Right? I have an uncle. My uncle has 15 children. He loves them all. Does he know everything that's going on with every single one of his 15 children? Maybe. I don't know. If he had 25 children, probably not as much, right? Man's mental capacity and emotional capacity is limited. But once we're talking about an eternal God, why can't he have, he says, "V'rahamav al kol ma'asav." God has compassion and he has mercy on all of his creatures, not just man. Also, we say, Zan umfaranes lakol. He provides and brings sustenance to all his creations, to all his creatures, from the measliest ant, right? Or as we said, Yetush katan asher yeh betabur haaretz. God has perfect knowledge on even the lowliest insect, right? That's inhabits the belly of the earth. So God has infinite capacity to know and to care about all of his creations. So why wouldn't he be observing and caring and providing over man, just like anything else? So that argument that the atheists like to bring, I think, kind of it's kind of like low level argument, because yeah, you could say that you don't believe in God. That's fine, all right. But once you're assuming the existence of God and assuming that God has infinite capacity, then that question really there's no place for that question to begin with. All right. So first of all, we go back to this first, this primary being, other than him being infinite, is that our model, our understanding of creation, our concept of creation to begin with, is that things only exist so long as God is we call it not potentially, but actualizing creation, meaning he's actually keeping it in mind. And that keeping it in mind makes the concept of hashgacha peratit, right, personal providence or divine providence over man, makes it a must. There is no creation, there is no universe without hashgacha peratit. And part of that hashgacha peratit is God's awareness of all of our actions, everything that we do. And this is a fundamental principle of the Torah, as we'll see soon, because of God, right? isn't aware of our action. We'll get to that soon. You know what? So Gedol Ha'isa, Rav Ha'aniniya, right? He is great of knowledge, of counsel, Rav Ha'aniniya, and he controls also the plots, everything that happens, the unfolding of history. Asher Einecha Pekuhot, which your eyes are observant, Al Kol Darche Bnei Adam, over all the ways of man. Ve'amar, says, "Vayar Adonai ki rabba ra'at ha'adam ba'aris." Says this is regarding the generation of the flood. It says, and God saw, meaning He was aware of the actions of man. It says, ki rabba, how great is the inequity, the evil of man. Ki rabba ra'at ha'adam ba'aris. And it also says regarding Sodom, Za'akat Sodom va'amora ki rabbah. He says he hears all the cries of people who are suffering in Sodom, right? Zehu more al yesod ha'asiri hazeh, right? This pasuk, these two pesukim, right? They confirm this fundamental principle, this 10th principle, that God has knowledge of man's actions and He is aware of man's actions. And the 11th principle, Vayesod ha'ehades asar, the 11th principle, Ki hu yit'aneh noten sachar lemí she'oseh mitzvot haTorah, v'ya'anish lemí she'over al hazharotea. Right, that God gives he gives reward to those who abide by the Torah, who follow the mitzvot, and that he punishes those who go against the mitzvot of the Torah, those who do the averot. V'chi hasachar hayoter gadol hu ha'olam haba. If you remember the beginning of the course, we're discussing the different types of sachar that are promised, right? There's Gan Eden, there is Yemot HaMashiach, the Messianic era. Gan Eden is the Garden of Eden. There are all the blessings in the Torah, right? But the greatest of all, the objective, the ends that we should all be striving to is the Olam Haba, right? The world to come. And we discussed what is the Olam Haba at length in previous lectures in this course. V'ha'onesh hayoter hazak hakaret. And the worst punishment that a person could get is karet. Karet is being cut off from this eternal life, this world to come, the Olam Haba. וכבר אמרנו בזה העניין מה שיספיק, and we already discussed this at length, right, in the previous chapters. There's no need to repeat them here. והמקרא המורה על היסוד הזה, מה שנאמר, ועתה אם תישא חטאתם, ואם אין, מחן הנה מספרך אשר כתבת. Right, and what is the pasuk that substantiates this fundamental principle is when Moshe Rabbeinu is arguing with God, because God wants to destroy the nation, and Moshe Rabbeinu is trying to appeal to him to make him have mercy on the nation. He says, "Ve'ata," he says, and now im tisah hatatam, if you forgive them, right, then we can discuss our next steps. Ve'im ayin, however, if you don't, meheni na misifrecha, he says, blot me out of your book that you have written. What book is he talking about? Well, in the Peshat, you may think that he's talking about the Torah, but he hasn't actually written the Torah yet. So the Sefer, the book that Moshe Rabbeinu is talking about, is the book of life, the book of the universe. He says, if you're not going to have mercy on the nation, if you're not going to forgive them for the golden calf, their sin, says, wipe me out. I want to have never have existed. I want my life to end, not just my physical life. I don't want to be part of this story. והשיב לו השם יתברך, and God responded to him, מי אשר חטא לי, he who sinned against me, imhenu misifri. Only him will I blot out of my book. Meaning, God, he's aware of every individual's actions, and he will give reward to those who deserve, and he will give a punishment, the worst of the punishments, karet, to those who are deserving of karet. Right, so this pasuk is proof that God is aware of people's actions, who is transgressing the Torah, and to give him punishment, לתת שכר לזה, right, to give reward to those who deserve it, ועונש לזה, and to give punishment to you know, to the evil person, and to give the sachar to the one deserving, the tzaddik. All right, so let's go, since we're almost at the end. We have a little extra time. Let's go a little bit deeper into this concept of sachar and onish, where the Rambam talks about it more at length, and we've read these halachot a couple of times throughout the previous courses. It says, Reshut kol adam netuna lo. Every person, it's not just that God, it's not just a fundamental principle that God is aware of man's actions, but tied into this is also that man has dominion over his actions. He has reshut. Reshut means not just permission, but like al tidvadal la reshut is talking about not being too close to the authorities, to the government. It says you have governance, you have dominion over your actions. Reshut kol adam netuna lo. Im rasa lehatot asmo lederech tova v'liot tzaddik. If a man should choose to incline towards righteousness, to do good and be a righteous person, hareshut beyado, he can do that. V'im rasa lehatot asmo lederech ra'a v'liot rasha, hareshut beyado. However, if he wants to incline himself towards bad deeds and become a rasha, to become evil, he can do that as well. Hu shekatuv b'Torah. This is what the Torah explicitly says. Or we'll see, it's interesting how he interprets this pasuk. Hen ha'adam haya ki'ahad mimenu lada'at tov v'ra. He says, behold, man, right, has become. This is after he ate from the tree of knowledge. It says, behold, man, hen ha'adam haya ki'ahad mimenu, seems to be saying that he has become like one of us, lada'at tov v'ra, to know good from evil. Kilomar. Now see how he explains it. By the way, the way that Rambam explains it, the way he divides the sentence, he's basing this on the traditional Targum, the traditional a translation of Onkelos of the Torah, which is it's the only officially accepted translation of the Tanakh. It says Kilomar. This is what it means. Hen min zeh shel Adam, this species of man, haya ehad ba'olam, is unique in the world. It says hen ha'adam haya ki'ahad. This is ki'ahad mimenu. It's not say ki'ahad mimenu. It's not that he's one of us, but that he is one, meaning unique in this respect, that haya ehad ba'olam ve'en sheni, en min sheni domeno b'zeh ha'inyan. There's no other species that resembles man in this respect, that mimenu, from himself, sheyehu me'atzmo, that he from himself, b'da'ato, in his mind, u'b'machshavto, in his intellect, in his thinking, in his reasoning, Yodea hatov v'hara. That from his own reasoning, he can decide what is right and what is wrong. Ve'oseh kol ma shu hafetz, and he can do whatever he wills, whatever he wishes, free will. Ve'en lo mi she'ya'akev al yado mila'asot hatov o hara. And there is nobody that can infringe upon a person's dominion to do as he wills, to choose either to do good or to do bad. V'kivan shekenu, and because of that, this is the rest of the pasuk, says, pen ishlach yado, right? We are going to put some sort of safeguard around the tree of life, because man, the same way as he destroyed and devoured the tree of knowledge, we're afraid that now that he has this free will to do whatever he wants, and he's chosen to do evil already, we're going to put safeguards around the tree of life. All right? So Reshut Kol Adam, man has dominion. What does this mean when he says Ke'ahad Mimenu? Right? When the Nahash, when the serpent says to Chava, says Vihitem Ke'Elohim Yodei Tov V'Ra, you shall be like Elohim that knows good from evil. Elohim, what does Elohim mean? He says Elohim is a term that we associate with God, but that's not the meaning of the word Elohim. Elohim means supreme authority, right? The Bedin is called Elohim. Ad ha-Elohim yavod devar shenehem, right? When it says Vayira'u b'nei ha-Elohim et benot ha-Adam, right? When the sons of the Elohim saw the women, the daughters of man, and chose to take women from Kol Asher Baharu, from whoever they wanted. It says, who is it talking about? B'nei Elohim, right? The Rashi commentating based on the Targum of Onkelos, the translation of Onkelos says that these are the princes. B'nei Elohim are the sons of the highest authority, the kings, right? B'nei Elohim are the princes. So when the Nahash, the serpent, is saying to Chava, says, V'yitem ke'Elohim yod'eh tov v'ra, you shall be like gods, right? Like supreme authorities, meaning the absolute authority to decide, absolute dominion over your will and over your actions. Says you shall be at this level where you yourself can decide what is right and what is wrong. And because man can decide for himself and not rely on the Torah, he can decide that right is evil and that evil is right. God puts safeguard around the Torah, the tree of life. It says, Al ya'avor b'machshavtecha davar zeh she'omrim tipshei ha'umot ve'rov golmei b'nei Yisrael. Says, don't think, don't have this thought that many people believe around the world, right? Among the ignoramuses of the nations, and also many immature of the Jewish nation, Bnei Israel, Golmei Bnei Israel, Shakadosh Baruch Hu gozer al ha'adam mitchinat briyato liyot tzaddik or rasha, right? That God destines man to be either evil or wicked, and hadavar ken, says that is not true. Ela kol adam va'adam, every person, ra'ui liyot tzaddik ke Moshe Rabbeinu or rasha ki Yarovam. Anybody has the ability to be as righteous as Moshe, or as wicked as Yerovam, or Hacham or Sachar, or he can be Hacham, wise, or he can be ignorant as Sachar, or Rahman or Achzari, or he could be merciful, or he could be, what's the word in English? The opposite of merciful. Someone help me? Wicked.
Cruel.
Cruel.
Yeah.
or merciful, or wicked, or kilai, or shua, or you could be generous, or you could be stingy, and so to all the other characteristics of man. Every person has the right to decide the way they are going to behave. ואין לו מי שיכפהו ולא גוזר עליו. And there is nobody to force you, coerce you to do something that you do not want to do. ולא מי שמושכו לאחד משני הדרכים. And no one pulling you to gravitate towards one of these two paths. אלא הוא מעצמו ומדעתו נוטה לאיזה דרך שירצה. Only man for himself, every individual can decide for himself which way you are going to go. This is what Jeremiah says. This is Megillat Echa, right? In his lamentations for the destruction of the temple, right? The greatest catastrophe that hit the Jewish people up until then. He says, from the mouth of God, good and evil does not come from God. He doesn't dictate who is good and who is evil. He doesn't dictate these disasters that come to man, that befall man as a consequence of their bad actions, or the good things that come to man, right? He gives us the way to behave properly, good things come. Behave improperly, bad things happen. And it's not God who decided to destroy the temple. It's the Jewish people decided when they behaved poorly. כלומר, אין הבורא גוזר על האדם לא להיות טוב ולא להיות רע. Right? And meaning God does not dictate for man to be either right or evil. We'll skip this for now. ועיקר זה עיקר גדול. And this principle is fundamental principle that man decides for himself, and this is vehu amud haTorah v'hamitzvah. And this is the pillar of the Torah, the pillar of the whole concept behind commandments, is that we can decide for ourselves if we're going to comply with them or if we're going to transgress them. שנאמר, ראה נתתי לפניך היום את החיים ואת הטוב. It says, behold, I put before you today life and good, ואת המוות ואת הרע, and death and bad. וכתוב, ראה אנוכי נותן לפניכם היום ברכה וקללה. It says, behold, I put before you today blessing and a curse. כלומר שהרשות בידכם. It's up to you. You decide. וכל שיחפוץ האדם לעשות ממעשה בני האדם, עושה, and everything that man wants to do out of human actions, he can do, ben tovim, ben ra'im, whether they be good or evil. And now let's get back. So the 10th principle is that God is fully aware of man's actions, and therefore the 10th principle is that God brings good to those who do good, and he brings bad to those who do bad. The ultimate reward and punishment is whether you live in the world to come, live on forever, or you cut off from the world to come and die forever. All right. So that's the 10th and the 11th. And the 12th, Yesod Hashenem Asa, the 12th principle of our belief, Vehu leha'ami ayimot HaMashiach, the Messianic era. Vehu leha'amin ul'amet sheyavo, and that is to believe and to confirm that, in your mind, to confirm that Mashiach will come. Confirm it based on the Pesukim. Velo yachshov sheit'acher im yitmahameh hakelo. Says, and don't think that the time for the Messianic era has already passed and we missed it and it's never going to happen again. All right? Because even if you say, oh, the Mashiach came, right? Koresh, Cyrus, the king of Persia, was referred to as the Messiah. Why? Because he gave us a license to come back to Jerusalem and to rebuild the temple. And so he's referred to as the Mashiach. Shaul was called the Mashiach. David was called the Mashiach. but this is all past. That's it. It's gone. It happened. Says, if you're not living in the Messianic era, it's taking its time. Wait, it'll come. Right? And we shouldn't associate a specific time to when he comes. And person shouldn't try to calculate based on all sorts of hints in the Tanakh, right? Especially in Sefer Daniel, there's a lot of hints to when the Messianic era might be, when the Mashiach will reveal himself, right? And some people, they make a living out of calculating and preaching about the Messianic era, and it's going to come in year, I don't know, 2020, it's going to come at this date. It says, "V'hachamim omrim," this is the wise men say, the Hachamim, they say, "Tipach ruhan shel mechashevei kisin." This has made their minds of the people who calculate the date of the Mashiach, made their minds be blotted out, right? They don't want us to try to associate a date. It gives people false hope. And all these people who try to sell you on a certain date, it's because they're trying to prey on your hope, right? Trying to give you hope. It's usually to try to take advantage of people. This is maybe like one of the number one strategies of false messiahs or gurus or people who try to, get this whole congregation around them and assume some sort of a messianic figure. טיפח רוחן של מחשבי כיסים, right? ושיאמין בו ולגדלו ולאהבו ולהתפלל בשבילו. So let's go back to what is this fundamental principle of believing that the Messianic era will come, even if we don't know when, and we can't calculate when, but to have faith that it's going to happen, and we're going to wait for it to happen patiently, and not follow these calculations of people trying to prey on our hope. ונתפלל בשבילו, we're going to pray for Mashiach to come, for the Messianic era to come, כפי מה שניבאו עליו כל הנביאים ממשה עד מלאכי עליו השלום. Right, as was prophesied by all the prophets, all the way from Moshe in the Torah to Malachi, the last of our prophets, they all gave us hope of this Messianic era. ומי שהסתפק בו, and someone who denies his coming, his existence, or casts doubt on it, או נתמעט אצלו מעלתו, or diminishes from the importance of this Messianic era, right, which symbolizes being able to fulfill the entire Torah, all the mitzvot of the Torah, including the korbanot, including all the laws regulating our society, regulating our government, our governance. So anybody who denies this, anyone who tries to doubt it, kafar b'Torah, he denied the Torah. Sheyi'ida bo b'Torah b'firush b'parashat Bil'am, right? Which the Torah explicitly talks about the Mashiach coming in parashat the parashat of Bil'am, Balak, parashat Balak, right? It says ere'enu velo ata, shurenu velo karov. Right, there's many pesukim talking about the coming of the Mashiach, and the last later parasha, ואתם ניצבים, ומכלל יסוד זה, שאין מלך לישראל, אלא מבית דוד, ומזרע שלמה בלבד. And part of this fundamental principle is to acknowledge that the ultimate kingdom of Israel is only held by the house of David. Only from Shevet Yehuda, right, the tribe of Judah, who was destined to be the ruling tribe, the family of David, specifically from the lineage of Shlomo, his son Shlomo, and not other lineages. And apparently the reason why the Rambam specifies this is because Jesus is claimed to be from the family of King David, but not from Shlomo, from one of his other sons. וכל החולק על המשפחה הזאת, and anybody who wants to revolt against this family, כפר בשם יתברך ובדבריו נביאיו. Right? He rejects the Torah and rejects the statements of the Hachamim, of the prophets. And here too, I also want to go into Hilchot Melachim u'Milchamot. This is the end of the Mishneh Torah, right? The Rambam, he wrote a 1,000-chapter summary of the entire oral Torah, all the, how do you call it? All the halachot regulating Jewish society and Jewish life. And the last piece is the laws of the monarchy, of the Jewish monarchy. The last 2 chapters are regarding the Messianic era. It says, HaMelech HaMashiach, Atid La'amod, right? The king, the Messianic king will come back, Ulhachzir Malchut Bet David, Yoshna HaMemshala HaRishona. He's going to restore the kingdom of David in its place. Uvone Mikdash, right? Part of his job description is to rebuild the temple, Kabes Lidhai Israel, and gather in the ingathering of whatever's left of the Jewish people from the far reaches of the world. וחוזרים כל המשפטים בימיו כשהיו מקודם. And he restores, reinstates all of the laws of the Torah as they were once upon a time. Makrivin korbanot, right? We renew the worship in the temple with sacrifices. Ve'osin shemitin ve'yovelot, and we reinstate the practice of the shemitah. Right, every 7th year you cannot work the ground, and every 50th year we do like a second shemitah, which is called the yovel, right? And at that time, everyone goes back to their properties. It's a very, very interesting topic, the whole topic of shemitah and yovel. It's actually the cornerstone of the Jewish financial system as a Jewish nation. ככל מצוותן האמורה בתורה. Right? We do the shemitim and the yovlot, the korbanot, everything as prescribed by the Torah. וכל מי שאינו מאמין בו, and anyone who doesn't believe in the coming of the Mashiach, או מי שאינו מחכה לביאתו, who does not wait his coming, לא בשאר נביאים בלבד הוא כופר, אלא בתורה ובמשה רבנו. Not only is he denying the statements, the prophecies of all the other prophets, but so too is he denying the Torah and Moshe Rabbeinu. Sherei Torah he'ida anav. The Torah testified it. Shneimar v'shav Hashem Elohecha et shevutecha. Right, that God is going to restore you. V'richamecha, right, and have mercy on you. V'shav v'kibesecha mikol ha'amin, and He's going to gather you in from all the nations. Im yeni dachacha b'ksei hashamayim. Says, if you be spread out throughout all the way to the ends of the earth, the ends of the of the skies of the earth, from there God will bring you back. And He's going to bring you back to the land. And these are the explicit statements of the Torah. Right? They include everything that was all the statements of all the prophets throughout the entire rest of the Bible. All right, and here he goes into Parashat Bilam, and I want to skip to the next chapter, the last chapter. Oh, no, sorry, I think it was still in that chapter. ואם יעמוד מלך מבית דוד, הוגה בתורה ועוסק במצוות כדוד אביו, says, if there shall be a king that rises from the family, from the lineage of King David, and he practices the Torah, ועוסק במצוות כדוד אביו, as his ancestor David, כפי תורה שבכתב ושבעל פה, following the written law and according to the oral tradition. ויחוב כל ישראל ילך בה ולחזק בדקה, right? And he forces everyone, like the law of the land is the law of the Torah, וילחם מלחמות Hashem, and he fights the wars on God's behalf. הרי זה בחזקת שהוא משיח, right? So this person is now, we say, there's a high chance that this person is the Mashiach. Im asa v'hisniach, and if he succeeded in all his wars, v'nisach kol ha'umot shesvivav, and he defeated all his enemies surrounding us, uvana mikdash bimkomo, and he succeeded in rebuilding the temple, v'kibes nidhei Yisrael, and he gathered in everyone from all over the world, then we say, harei zeh Mashiach bevadai. Only then, after he succeeds in everything, will we say this person was the Mashiach that God promised us. All right. By the way, there's a conception, a misconception out there that, you know, we shouldn't be going up. Let's say we shouldn't be going up to Temple Mount. We shouldn't do anything. We shouldn't. They used to say, don't make Aliyah. Don't move, immigrate to Eretz Israel, right? We have to wait for the Mashiach to come and do all these things. Nowhere in Halakha does it say that. We do not need to wait around for the Mashiach to come. We say the person who's the Mashiach is the person who actually succeeded in doing all those things. We have a mitzvah to build a temple. We have a mitzvah to sacrifice the korbanot. We have a mitzvah to live in Eretz Israel, right? We need to do these mitzvot regardless of whether the Mashiach came or not, right? But the person who's actually going to enable us to do all that and reestablish our Jewish monarchy, so when he succeeds, then we'll say he's Mashiach. But it's everyone's responsibility. Anyone who has the power to try and do it needs to try to do it, to accomplish it. To try to keep the mitzvot. That's everyone's obligation. Ve'im lo hisniach ad ko, and if he did not succeed, or neherag, or he went out, he was fighting many battles, and he was killed at war. For instance, we just came out of Hanukkah recently. Hanukkah, we had the Hashmonaim, right? They went out, they revolted against the Greeks, they restored the temple. Yehuda HaMaccabi, he's going up and he's fighting the wars, but he was killed. He was killed in battle. We say, oh, he's a false Messiah? No, we don't say that. Beyadua she'eno ze she'ivticha alav Torah. We just need to be reassured that this isn't the Mashiach that God promised us. V'hareu kechol malchei bet David hashlemim hakesherim shemetu. His status is that of any of the righteous kings of Israel who tried their best to keep the Torah, who tried to fight off our enemies and keep us safe and build the Mikdash, but they didn't succeed. And he's kasher, he's a righteous king. ולא העמידו הקדוש ברוך הוא אלא לנסות בו רבים. He sent him in order to to give us experience, to teach us, to fight battles. Doesn't mean that he is the Mashiach, that he's going to definitely succeed. And another one, Bar Kochva. He also led a revolt against the Romans. He didn't succeed. He died. But he was considered to be a righteous leader. It says, Af Yeshua HaNosri. Says, even talking when I was going to Jesus, even Jesus from Nazareth, Mashiach, that he thought of himself that he is the Messiah, and he was executed according to he was how do you call it? The Beit Din sentenced him to death. It was the Romans who actually took him and executed him. Daniel right, that people, right, Perisei Amecha is talking about like no, what's the word? No, Mizuyaf. Someone who, he's pretending to be something that he's not. Phonies. Phony people coming out of the nation are going to assume this job of Mashiach and they're going to fail. Could there possibly any greater obstacle to the Messianic era than the workings of Jesus? שכל הנביאים דיברו שהמשיח גואל ישראל ומושיעם. But all the prophecies say that the Mashiach is going to redeem the Jewish people, save them from the enemies, and gather them from all over the world, and is going to solidify the misvot. And this person, he caused many massacres to the Jewish people. And to spread out the remains of the Jewish people throughout the entire Roman Empire. And to substitute the Torah for some other religion that annuls all the mitzvot of the Torah. And to cause the rest of humanity to worship some other God that isn't him, some holy trinity, some pagan concept. Right? So is there any bigger obstacle to the redemption of the Jewish people and the solidifying of the Torah in Eretz Yisrael than what Jesus did? So that's an example of a false Messiah, not a righteous failed one, a false Messiah, someone who led everyone the wrong direction. We've had a few of them in history, such as Shabtai Tzvi. All right, so let's get back. So this 12th principle of faith, the Messianic era. The point of this Messianic era is, what is the Messianic era? Is that there's going to be a king. The kingdom of Israel is going to be restored to the house of David. The purpose of that is so that we can fulfill the mitzvot, the Torah in its entirety. All right, and if you go a step further, what's the point of all that? Is so that we can get Olam Haba on the highest possible level. Vayesod hashilosha asar, and the 13th fundamental principle of faith, Tehiyat Hamitim, the resurrection of the dead. That people who die sometime, presumably after the Messianic era starts, people will be resurrected from the dead and live in this Messianic era. And we've already discussed what is Tehiyat HaMitim earlier. Just a quick reminder that the dead will come back to life. And what's the point of that? Is because throughout most of our history, we've been in persecution. We couldn't fulfill the mitzvot properly. We couldn't study the wisdom of God properly. In the Messianic era, we will be able to. And so therefore, the people who didn't merit to have to live in these times where you can study Torah and keep the mitzvot will be able to have another opportunity to do that and reach their full potential of living in Olam Haba. And when a person, right, acknowledges and understands and believes these 13 principles, all of these 13 principles, right, and he uses them as a foundation of his faith, he becomes part of this Klal Yisrael, this community of Israel, the Jewish people. And you have a mitzvah to love them, you have a mitzvah to have mercy on them, right, and to treat them with respect and treat them with call it communal love. ואפילו עשה מה שיכול מן העבירות מחמת התאווה והתגברות הטבע הגרוע, even if this person sins, right? He believes all of these principles, meaning in the foundation, he believes in a God, he believes in the revelation, he believes in doing good, he believes in exercising your free will, right? He believes in doing the mitzvot. However, we all have a yetzer. We're not perfect. We sometimes do things that we shouldn't. That does still is part of the righteous people of Israel, and you need to love him and have compassion over him. Right? He will be punished in accordance to his sins. However, that doesn't cut him off from this eternal life, from this olam haba. He is human. Humans make mistakes. Humans do wrong things. Right? And the worst, he is considered to be a criminal. He does some criminal acts, but he's still a good person. He also does a lot of mitzvot. Right? It says, Afinu rekanim shebach, even those who are empty, right? Mileim mitzvot karimon, right? They are full of mitzvot, like a pomegranate is full of seeds. It says, Afinu rekanim shebach, even those people who do a lot of sins or criminals, they still have a lot of mitzvot that they do. Right? It says, Rasah Kadosh Baruch Hu Lizakot Israel. Right? God wanted to merit the Jewish people. Lefichach, therefore, Hirba lahem Torah u'mitzvot. He gave them lots of mitzvot. Why? There's 613 mitzvot, right? All the rest of humanity have got 7 mitzvot. So, okay, you want to make a special nation? Give them 100 mitzvot. Give them 50 mitzvot. Why 613 mitzvot? Why so many mitzvot? It says Rasah Kadosh Baruch Hu Lezakot et Israel, because he wanted us to merit doing mitzvot. There are so many mitzvot that even if you don't want to do mitzvot, you're going to accidentally do mitzvot here and there. If you respected your parents, you did something nice for your parents, you did something nice for your neighbors, even if you didn't mean to, right? You get to merit these mitzvot, and you have a helek to olam haba, right? Even if you're not the greatest person, and you do, you get angry a lot, you yell a lot, you still have mitzvot that you do all the time. That's why God gave us so many mitzvot. So it says, only Poshe Israel. So he's one of the sinners of Israel. But he still has a portion in the world to come, because he's part of our nation and he keeps these mitzvot. However, when a person deviates from these fundamental principles, no longer believes in free will, in revelation, that there is a God, that there's a supreme authority, that there's a Torah that we receive from the heavens, that's it, this person left the community, the kafar ba'ikar, right? And now he rejected the main ikar, right? Or the fundamentals of Judaism, of our faith, min, and he's referred to as different names, min, epikoros, kotzetz banetiyot. These are different terms that the Chachamim use to describe this kind of a heretic. And we need to get rid of them. And even this, he says that we need to hate them, despise them, and get rid of them. This doesn't really apply to, we'll call it like the non-religious or atheists today, where there's so much confusion around these, talking about times where we actually had wars with these groups of people. There were civil wars, people who wanted to deny the tradition of the Hachamim, and they'd actually make communities, and they'd actually go to war. They'd hate the Jewish people, or called the mainstream Jewish people. And in that case, they're right? the people who despise you, I will despise as well. I will despise them. And those who fight against you, I shall fight. I will take up the fight. And I have already deviated a lot from the purpose of this project of commentary, giving a commentary on the Mishnah, right? He gave a nice long introduction to this single chapter in the Mishnah. אבל אני עשיתי זה לפי שראיתי בו תועלת באמונה. But I did this because I saw great value in bringing forth these principles. לפי שאספתי לך בו דברים מועילים. Right? I collected here some very, very valuable ideas for you. מפוזרים מספרים גדולים וחשובים, right? That are spread out throughout many different books, difficult books, big books, like the Talmud is huge, this huge piece of literature. So I gathered these pearls from all over the Talmud and the Midrashim to put them here for you. לכן אצלח בהם. This other translation that says, be happy with it. יהיה מאושר בהם. וחזור עליהם פעמים רבות. It says, and review this over and over and over again. והתבונן בהם התבוננות יפה. It says, and meditate on them. Think of these 13 principles. What is the meaning of a primary being? What is the meaning of there being an infinite God that's not bound by any physical or temporal restrictions, that has infinite knowledge and capacity for love and for compassion, and that He knows everything that we do, right? And that we have freedom of choice, which is also a very big topic that many philosophers have discussed for centuries, right? Says, I laid down the foundations for you. There's tons of philosophy that's incorporated into here. I gave you here the bottom lines, maybe a few ideas for you to start meditating on. It says, but study this, review this over and over and over again, right? If these 13 principles is what makes you part of the Jewish community, the more you master them, the better you master them, the more Jew you are, right? If this is a function of our Olam Haba, I say Olam Haba is not you either have or you don't, right? There's different levels of living, there's different depths of understanding. And that's the whole reason why we want there to be a resurrection of the dead after the Messianic era, is so we can sit down and study these concepts and understand this wisdom of God. So the more you understand these 13 principles of faith, the deeper you go, the deeper your Olam Haba is, your eternal life, the more richer your life is. ואם יסיעך לבך ותחשוב שהגיע לך ענייניו מפעם אחת או מעשר, right? And if you have like a hefty heart, right? An arrogant heart, and you think that you understood these 13 principles from one time, or me'eser, or even from 10 times that you reviewed them, God knows that your heart is leading you astray, right? Read this carefully. It's not something that you should read haphazardly. He says, I didn't just write this, sitting in the bus. What am I going to write about today? I put up a nice little post, 13 ideas that I have on the fundamentals of Judaism. He says, no. He says, I dedicated a tremendous amount of time to writing this, to gathering these ideas, to take all of this tremendous amount of Jewish philosophy and breaking it down into these 13 bottom line principles of faith, right? So review it, show it the respect it deserves. This is what makes us part of the Jewish nation. Study it. ואחר שראיתי דעות ברורות, אמיתיות, right? And after I already, separated, the right ideas from the wrong ideas, and I figured out for you what you should be believing, right? וזולתי אמיתיות, right? The right from the wrong, right? We're talking about one of the greatest genius minds of the Jewish nation. וידעתי מהו שראוי להאמין מהם, right? And what are the things that you should believe in order to solidify our Torah? והבאתי ראיה, right? And I proved it. בטענות, right? From, intellectual ideas, right? I explained it philosophically, וראיות, and also proved it from the Pesukim, from the statements of the Chachamim and the Pesukim in the verses in the Torah. וראיות על כל עניין ועניין, and I proved it all, both in scripture and in rational philosophy. ומהשם יתברך אשאל להדריכני בדרך הטובה, and from God I prayed that He guides me on the right way and not make mistakes on laying down these 13 fundamental principles of Jewish faith. And even though Maimonides, there's a lot of controversy on what we should study from Maimonides and what not. Some people study everything that he writes, like me, and others say certain things we shouldn't be studying. It's too philosophical. It's too difficult. These 13 principles of faith were widely accepted even by those who object most to things that Maimonides says. And that should be enough to really understand how fundamental and how important these concepts are, and encourage you to delve into it deeper and meditate on it and study them, and not just, Sammy gave a class on the 13 principles of faith, and that's it. That's enough. That's enough for me. That's it. I can, check off a box. And okay, that's the end of this course. The introduction to Perek Helek, which is part of Maimonides' commentary to the Mishnah. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free. Unfortunately or not, I have many projects now that I'm working on, and I'm going to be taking a little break from teaching. Hopefully, I'll join back maybe in the next semester. I'll think of something new to teach then. So if anyone has any questions on what we've studied on this course or on this class, please feel free, and always feel free to reach out.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
תודה רבה, תודה
Thank
רבה.
you.
All right, ערב טוב.
ערב טוב. Thank you.
ערב טוב, רביי.
ערב טוב.
ערב טוב.